Afternoon, how are you today? Well, overcast, soggy again, in the 50s. There are several stories kicking around. I think what's going on in Ukraine is probably the top of the list right now. We have some discussion about the devices that are being used to kill in Ukraine. But if you're killing a child or a pregnant woman or a civilian, does it matter when death results, no matter what the weapon is? But there are a couple that raise our concerns. And it's almost like we want to conceal the weapons that are used so that our mind can't imagine the last moments of a person suffering in such extraordinary pain because of the nature of the weapon that's being used. You may or may not have heard of phosphorus bonds. My undergraduate degrees are physics and engineering, and I took a lot of chem labs. I did not enjoy chem labs, I enjoyed physics labs. And phosphorus is an element that binds strongly with oxygen, creating what we used to call, as a student and as they do who are professional chemists, an exothermic reaction, which is another way to say boom, fire, pain, suffering. So if this hits you, it would be like one of these terrible scenes you've seen where people run around in flames. What is a good way to die? I don't think there is one. Certainly if dying in your sleep is considered better, this is nothing like that. The other weapons we're concerned about are chemical weapons, nuclear tactical weapons. And we're going to draw a line in the sand if they use those. Why isn't the line drawn at death? Why isn't that the first concern? NATO had a meeting today in Brussels, Belgium, and Zelensky appeared by the president of Ukraine under siege. He appeared at a distance remotely, and he said that he wanted 1% of the planes they could give him, and 1% of the tanks, and anti-air missile structures, systems, and marine anti-marine weapons as well. In other words, something effectively to fight. People are talking about how, and this is the experts, that the talks to settle are just nonsense. Nothing's happening there. It's to satisfy those people that want to feel that there's something reasonable going on. And Putin has calculated very carefully each of these elements. And some say things like, well, you know, we hope that he'll give it up. He's not going to give it up. He's pure will. He is Nietzsche's will, intent. He's going to go forward until he wins. Now, earlier in the month, you may remember that Zelensky warned that if they didn't do something to help him, they'd be next. And they'd be coming from the air. And if you don't put something in place, you'll be next to suffer. Well, it sure is something to be concerned about, and I don't know what their intel tells them, but do we think that it's only about Ukraine? Do you think Putin's going to think he's safe then when he has Ukraine? I don't think so. So if we interfered, could we help? Could we actually win? Perhaps. In the next day, our President Biden is going to go to Poland. And I hope it's for more than just pictures with refugees. At a meeting today with NATO, they've announced additional sanctions and moving in more soldiers into the NATO areas supposedly defend there. Some say if you're using something like either a chemical weapon or a tactical nuclear weapon, that's a good basis to go in and fight. It's almost like we want to stand back and not fight until it's almost too late for us to make a difference and to put us at risk by the fact that we delayed. Everybody is saying that if you expect the dictator to not escalate if he sees it in his advantage by the fact that we don't do things that provoke his escalation, that's a lot of happy nonsense, because you always leave the initiative to, well, take your choices, insane or calculating dictator. So I'm hopeful that we're going to pivot at a time when it still matters. And I don't know what the reticence is, because this war is on, and it's a devastating and inhumane thing. Not that any war could be humane, but we've all read how the original wars, they'd face off like on a chessboard, and civilians were not to be involved. Well, that's long gone by. And we terrorize the most fragile of our population: children, pregnant women, the disabled, the aged, the sick. We don't care. And we don't care enough to fight to defend those who are the victims. Another issue that I have is down there in Manhattan. Mark Pomerantz and I were assistant U.S. attorneys at the same time. I didn't really know him well, and I just knew him in the office, and he was there toward the end of my stay, and he came back a second time in a more prominent position in the office. And I mention him by name because he's been one of the two prosecutors of Trump in the district attorney's office in Lower Manhattan. And he's written a letter of resignation that just became known, in which he says this office was authorized to prosecute Trump by the outgoing DA, Vance, and we have proof beyond a reasonable doubt of felonies committed by Trump, including upping the value of properties for purposes of getting debt that he could use, and downplaying the value of properties when purposes of taxes were involved. You know, and Mike Cohen is one of those witnesses. But DA Bragg just shut it down, like, very suddenly, given how the developments had been before he got there and the evidence that they had and the time they spent getting it. I would suspend Bragg if I had the authority to do it. I'd certainly open an investigation on him. And I would invoke the AG and the governor and the legislature to authorize the prosecution to go forward using the grand jury that was in place. And I would have Mark Pomerantz, if he was willing, to come back to do it, and the second prosecutor who also had been involved. The thing that is manifest in the failure of anybody up and down the East Coast, from New York to DC to Georgia, to do anything, is that we are put on notice that there are two tiers in our systems of justice. There's the political and business class, they're protected, and we the people are in the second class. And this lie is told and has been told for many years. And the fact that they were so arrogant in their misconduct that the public could observe, that we now know and can't avoid the data points that the system is fixed. So I hope that gives you something to think about, and I'll be out here tomorrow to talk to you, and hopefully we'll have some developments in both categories. All the best. Bye-bye.